Sometimes people flip because it looks so exciting on TV with all these reality TV shows, flipping this and flipping that. And yeah, it's pretty awesome on TV, but quite often they don't go quite to plan. And wholesale deals are a much safer way to do deals. I'm not saying never do a flip. Absolutely do flips, but make sure you have.
Hey, what's going on, Cashflow Hackers? It is Chris and Mike with Cashflow Hacking in Life 180, and we're here to talk today about the biggest mistakes that people make when they're flipping houses.
Where do we start?
Where do we start?
Where do we start?
Oh, let me count the ways. Mike, you flipped a lot of houses in your days.
I've flipped a lot of houses.
Right?
Yes, I've done my share of flips and I've done my share of flops. I think the first mistake is that deciding to flip it in the first place, because a lot of people are so anxious, especially when they're new. They just want to do a deal and everything to them looks like a deal. And then they like to really underestimate, well, what are my rehab costs going to be? And what are the holding costs going to be? And they just really want to fit it into, they just want to get it done. And they just want to get that first paycheck.
They want to force a deal.
They want to force a deal that's not really a deal. So the number one mistake is just trying to do a flip that shouldn't be a flip. And then there's also, sometimes you find deals that actually would be a successful flip, but they're going to take up, maybe you don't have the resources to complete it. Maybe you don't have your rehab crew. You don't have your contractors. So if you try to do that, and you're trying to build your team as you go, I got bad news for you. I don't know what your experience has been. I can tell you that trying to get contractors to show up, especially like after a weekend,
we did a flip at the beginning of COVID, and it was a nightmare.
Yeah, it's very hard to build teams, especially right now. So if you already have a team that you know, like, and trust, awesome. But if you don't, you might want to look at some other options. Maybe instead you want to wholesale the deal, which means you want to sell that deal to another investor, get paid for it, and not do the flip. And one of the things that I like that very few people look at, well, if it's going to take you 6 months to do a flip and you could wholesale the deal in 10 days, how much are you making per day? And how much less risk is there in doing a wholesale deal? So sometimes people flip because it looks so exciting on TV with all these reality TV shows, flipping this and flipping that. And yeah, it's pretty awesome on TV, but quite often they don't go quite to plan. And wholesale deals are a much safer way to do deals. I'm not saying never do a flip. Absolutely do flips, but make sure you have the right resources, the right people on your team, enough cash in the bank or enough other people's money to do it, and make sure that it actually makes sense. But then, okay, so let's say you've decided to go forward and do a flip. And even if it does make sense, well, here's a mistake I made on one of my very, very first deals. So I thought, I don't need to inspect it. I can.
No, you didn't.
I did. That was actually my second deal.
Oh, no.
My first deal I didn't inspect either, but it didn't go bad.
Well, right now, so let's talk about that for a second, because it's really important, because right now, buyers everywhere in this market are waiving their rights in that capacity. Because don't do that. And especially in a flip space, like, well, don't do it anyway.
Don't
no matter
do
what
it.
house you buy, never waive your rights.
If you can't inspect, inspections are worth their weight in gold. Here's why. If I put an offer on a home and we agree to a price and I get that inspection back, well, inspectors love to find problems. They never want to say, nope, the home's perfect. One, because there's a lot of liability issues for them if they say everything's perfect. If one thing goes wrong, you're going to sue them. And number two, they want you to feel like you got your money's worth. So it's like, oh, well, this plug is not quite right. This light switch, there's a cover missing. They come up with a lot of stuff. Sorry. Oops. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. They find a lot of stuff in these properties on purpose. And sometimes they're so minor, but they make them sound major. Or for liability issues, they say, well, it could be this. So, for example, if they see a crack in the foundation, well, 99 times out of 100, it's nothing. But there's that one time that it might be. So they would rather err on the side of caution.
Because they have liability.
They have liability. They want to make it sound like it's way worse than it really is most of the time. And it's a great tool to go renegotiate the price. Go back after to the owner and say, listen, this came up, this came up, this came up, this came up. And so, you know, we need to talk about price now, or I need some concessions to deal with those repairs. And so an inspection is very well worth its price. But a lot of people don't do it, especially right now. People are neglecting it because there's so many competing offers. But you know what? Sometimes the best offer you do is the one that you don't do. So those are some of the problems that come to, some of the biggest mistakes that come to mind. I think the other mistakes are people always underestimate how long is it going to take. Well, yeah, if your contractors show up every day on time, good for you. You're very, very fortunate. I'm lucky I'm at that point now where I do have great contractors, but I've gone through a ton of crappy contractors to get to those good ones.
Yep.
And then they also underestimate, especially if they're using hard money, how long it's going to take to get that deal done. And they say, it should take 90 days.
So your holding costs go up.
Right, your holding costs, and you have to pay utilities, and they don't calculate that in. And so at the end of the day, their margins are too thin, and they end up taking a loss on it. Yep. And those are all things you have to be really cognizant of before you ever jump into a flip.
That's crazy. That's the one thing I learned. My wife is a real estate agent here in Arizona, and I hear her putting together deals all the time, right? And the one thing I've learned is the inspector is your best friend when you're buying a house and your worst enemy when you're selling a house, right?
Yes.
Like if you get a good inspector on your team, like you want to make sure when you're buying a house, you don't just hire any random inspector either. Like work with an agent that has a good inspector that can work with, or have somebody that has a relationship with a good inspector. Like my wife works with an inspector, and I can speak to this because she's got this guy she works with that literally, I've been hearing her on deals. She's talked people down $20,000-$25,000 because of these inspections that come back. And I mean, you can just hear like it's really, I don't want to say it's BS, but like there's legitimate stuff in there. But like when you're buying, the bottom line is it's a negotiation, right? You're the buyer. You're trying to get the best deal because it's an investment, and they're trying to get the most value that they can get. So.
And just for the record, it's not all BS because they do find legitimate things. They tend to pad it with a bunch of other things. But the things that some of them are legitimate, and for example, you don't know that the roof has got like 2 years left on it sometimes.
Sure.
And that's going to be a legitimate expense. And sometimes those cracks do turn out to be something. And when you have foundation cracks, that can cost you a lot of money. So it's good to be in the know. It's not just saying we want to take advantage of a seller by feeding a bunch of BS.
Yeah, no, totally. And it's important to be more safe than sorry, right? Because like all it takes is one bad deal and it can wipe out profits from 5 other good deals.
Absolutely. It can knock you out of the game. And I've seen people do that where it's like, that was it. Knocked the wind out of their sails, and it's like, I don't want to do real estate anymore.
Yep.
So it's really important to do things properly. I always put 25. If I think a deal is going to go 6 months, I give it an extra 2 months on top of that, just as padding.
Okay.
And I whenever I calculate my expenses, I add another 20% on top of that just to be safe. And so if I ever get a surprise, it's always a good surprise. Hey, we came in under budget, under time. It's never. And like I said, so many people try to turn it into a deal, so we can do it in 60 days. Yeah. It's never going to happen. Yeah. Right. It's never going to happen. And so don't just be realistic. Be conservative. Be super safe. Be super careful. And sometimes it's better just to walk away from a deal as opposed to trying to rationalize why it's going to make you money, because 9 times out of 10 it won't.
So when you talk about flips, how do you know, like, is there like 1 or 2 bullet points that you get, like the most important things on how to analyze whether it's like high level? Obviously we're not going to get into all the deep nuances in this video, but like 1 or 2 major things that you see people like consistently make horrible mistakes with.
Well, one is after repair value, or known as ARV. So they overestimate what they're going to sell that home for, and they get a list of comparables from a realtor, for example, and the realtor is going to give them 10, and they're going to look at the one that's the top one. And what they don't know, because they didn't do their research, is the top one backs onto the golf course, and yours is on a busy street. So the home looks equally nice, but your location is not as good.
Yep.
So don't look at the best case scenario. I always like to look at sometimes the worst case scenario, actually, and say, okay, if in the worst case, if it were to sell for this, would I still make a profit? And so quit trying to rationalize deals. That's really the biggest thing, is after repair value is it's paramount to knowing what the home's actually going to sell for. And then don't forget any expenses. Like a lot of people say, they don't remember they got to pay these utilities. They got to pay, if they're using hard money, they got to pay for that. There's a lot of different things that are going to come out of that. You got to pay your realtor fees to sell it. And also keep in mind, a lot of people, when the market's really hot like it is right now, they're so excited to get a deal, but they don't realize that market, real estate's very cyclical. I saw so many people back in 2007, 2008 buying, and they're using what I call the hope and pray method. I hope and pray the market keeps going up forever. And they don't realize that, guess what? Eventually it's going to come back down. And they got caught holding the bag. Because what we have during really hot markets is we have one speculator selling to another speculator selling to another speculator.
It's almost like a Ponzi scheme.
It is in a way, because there's really no end buyer. There's no end buyer in sight, because a typical 2-income family can't even afford a 1-bedroom apartment. Guess what they're doing? They're moving to a different market. And so the last person gets stuck holding the bag, they take the loss, or they get the foreclosure on their record, and we saw so much of that back in the last recession.
So one of the biggest things when you talk about understanding that risk and looking at comps, comparable houses in the market or in the neighborhood or whatever, and you looking at the bottom. I was actually just reading a book, and this one guy, I can't remember the name of the book off the top of my head, but he was talking about the fact that his life changed, and he's a Fortune 50 CEO, right? So like this guy's like super successful guy, and he said his life changed and his results in his life changed when he stopped trying to think about how to chase all the wins, and he started thinking about how to avoid the losses. And his statement was, he started this process of making decisions thinking about what's the upside, what's the downside, and can I live with the downside? Exactly. If this thing goes wrong, can I live with it? Am I still going to be good to go? Right. And if the answer is no, he doesn't do it. If the answer is yes, he moves forward. And so to me, that's a good rule of thumb and a good way to look at it.
Absolutely. And that's what I call being conservative in your investments. You're looking at the worst case scenario, not the best, and thinking, okay, if this deal goes totally wrong, will I still be okay? And don't put all your eggs in one basket. And I see so many people, and it's kind of like gambling. You have a couple of successes, and then you get really confident, and then it's like, I'm all in. And then next thing you know, it's just Murphy's Law. The market shifts on you. And now, I saw so much of that back in the last recession.
I played poker for a living for 6 years.
That's right.
And so
that's right.
in the mid 2000s, and like that's the number one thing a casino wants for a person coming and playing the slot machines is to hit big their first time. Because if you get a person who walks into the casino for the first time and hits big, like the odds are against them statistically, and they can know that, but emotionally they're never just never process.
You always think you have a system. Right? You always
totally.
think you have
I got this pegged. I got the system pegged. But all right, Mike. Well, that was awesome.
That was fun,
guys. I hope you found value in this. If you did, please hit that like button. Get it out to the YouTube algorithm. It will share with a lot of people who need to see this. If you haven't already, subscribe. Hit that bell. That way you get notified every time we launch a video. Mike and I are doing a ton of cash flow hacking videos here. Check out below, cashflowhacking.com. Go check it out. If you have any questions, want to connect with him, learn about real estate investing, learn about anything to do with cash flow hacking, Mike is the guy. He's been doing real estate cash flow hacking for 32 years now, right?
Longer than you've been alive.
Almost. Maybe I look
almost.
Whatever.
Yeah,
but if you go to the end screen here, we're actually going to have a list. It's a real estate investment playlist that you can click on that will really serve you and help you get more information. I know that will pour into you, that it'll help you learn a lot. Probably, honestly, you're going to learn more in this playlist about real estate investing than you probably pay in some courses. So check that out. And then there's another cool video there that we'd like to share with you. So keep the journey going. I encourage you. You can accomplish everything that you want to accomplish. Keep watching, keep learning, keep pouring into yourself, and you can get there. So until next time, go out, have a blessed, inspirational day, and we'll talk to you then.
Have a good one.